Hello everybody and welcome to the Showcast, a series of candid conversations from the world of film, brought to you by The Film Verdict and hosted by yours truly, Matt Micucci. On today's episode, we sit down with one of Saudi Arabia's foremost filmmakers, Hamzah Jamjoom, whose award-winning films, including Rupture from 2021 and How I Got There from 2022, make him one of the most awarded filmmakers in the country. And we take this opportunity to talk about the birth of his interest in movies and his work in both animation and live action projects. We also talk about the importance of his Saudi heritage and how his works aim to speak to his own people as well as reach an international audience. And aside from sharing stories from his formative years and his career up to this point, Jamjoom also talks about some of his upcoming projects and future ambitions, as well as his thoughts on the growing film industry and film culture of Saudi Arabia. So fire up an audio teeny and listen to the audio waves as they fly through the air. This is the Showcast. Hello, Hamzah. Welcome to the Showcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's a real pleasure to have you. You know, I'm looking forward to chatting with you about the cinematic art form. And one of the ways that I like to begin my conversations on this podcast series is by breaking the ice and asking a very simple question. And I'd like to ask you the very same one. What is your earliest memory of cinema?
I guess it goes back to me putting my feet up against the TV in our living room in Jeddah and watching the countdown to our favorite cartoon show that my brother and I used to watch. That was the highlight of my childhood. I remember even the Saudi TV wasn't on all the time. So we would gather, put our feet up, watch the counter go down, down, down until we would watch our favorite animation come to on the air.
So animation is what got you in the first place?
Yeah, animation has been a big part of my life. Growing up in Saudi, we had, funny enough, we had a lot of exposure to Japanese anime. That was probably the entry point for a lot of filmmakers my age in Saudi, as we consumed a lot of Japanese anime. They were extremely well made and extremely well translated, and the voice-over acting was superb. It was just captivating for me growing up to watch that. Another good memory that I've had is near where I lived, my family has created one of the first cinemas in Saudi, in Al-Baghdadiya, which is a district in Jeddah, or a neighborhood in Jeddah. It has been shut down a long time before I was born, but the cinema was there. It was just an empty parking lot where they used to put chairs and throw up a screen and watch movies there. At the time, when they were playing movies there, there was no structure or legal process of having theaters. But anyways, so near my house, one of our great uncles used to own this theater. And then he transitioned to distributing movies through his... So I used to sneak into their facility near our house and just watch the old film reels being edited and see how they were translating. They moved to VHS. So I was slightly exposed to that world. It was very strange to me. It wasn't in my mind to become a filmmaker ever. I always wanted to become an engineer. But that's also one of the earliest experiences I've had. And also it was heavily involved or heavily influenced by animation. Like most of the movies they were distributing were somewhat animation related.
When did you start thinking of becoming a filmmaker then?
I guess reflecting back on my life, I was being groomed to become a filmmaker. My mom used to, whenever we would do something wrong, would force me to read novels. I honestly, growing up, I didn't enjoy reading that much until my mom started giving us books that were about characters that had amazing story arcs and amazing changes in the story. And I started kind of enjoying being punished by doing wrong things and handed books to read. I always, even during high school, I excelled in math and physics. And I actually applied to school to go to engineering school. I always thought I would become a mechanical engineer. And then I went to college for mechanical engineering. The first year was eye-opening for me because it was truly very boring. I thought I would be designing robots and machines that would transform and do things that would move. And I think that was me tricking myself into thinking an engineer is actually a filmmaker because I had this obsession with building robots and things that would change shapes and move. So our college offered a program that was called Computer Graphics Animation. It was under the computer science department. So I took a course and immediately I was like, okay, this is actually what I want. I get to use my math skills, my programming skills to create animations that would tell a story. Initially, the program was for technical people. So we were being taught how to create tools that would simulate wind, gravity, earthquakes, and whatnot. So it wasn't an animation school. It was more a computer science school that offered computer graphics so that you become an engineer that would create tools for engineering simulations. But anyways, so in the first year, I wrote like 10,000 lines of code and I created an animation. It's pretty funny. It's using the Mana Mana song with teacups singing it. And from that point on, I was like, this is it. I get to tell stories using my skill set. And then I switched tracks to animation in my undergrad and never looked back.
So much like animation was sort of the thing that got you interested in cinema in the first place, animation is kind of the thing that led you to, making movies, I guess.
Yeah. It's really interesting because, as I said, like somehow animation allowed me to use my skill set as my math skills and my programming skills to create images, which you don't need to buy a camera, you don't need to hire a crew or anything. It was just me in front of my computer trying out different codes to try and generate new images. So yeah, it really opened my eyes to the possibilities of becoming a filmmaker. By the end of my undergrad, I was completely convinced that I should become a filmmaker and that my mission in life should be to clear misconceptions about my people and where I come from. Because during school, everybody was fascinated by my background, that I was Saudi, and I was doing animation. And half of my life was me explaining my culture to my colleagues and my friends and everyone around me. So I guess it was a double punch where I realized my skill set can allow me to make animations. I'm already defending and clearing misconceptions about my people. Why not just go to film and do that? Use both my skill and my storytelling abilities to do that.
Right, because you grew up, you were born in Saudi Arabia, but you grew up in the States, right?
No, I was born and raised in Saudi. I came to the US late in high school. My
Oh, okay.
sisters were already accepted in colleges in the US. So as a family, we moved to be with them. I have two beautiful older sisters and a younger sister, but my older sisters are legendary. I wish I can become like them one day. One is in finance and the other is in education, specifically learning disabilities. She has a PhD. So anyway, so they kind of the whole family moved to allow all of us exposure to education in the US. So I moved with the family and I was just finishing up my high school. It was a very hard transition for me. I know I sound like I know how to speak English really well, but when I came to the US, I did not speak English whatsoever.
Wow.
Yeah, at all. I was an A student in Saudi back home. My mother is an amazing teacher and really focused on our education. So I excelled in school while I was in Saudi. When I came here to the U.S., really struggled. Like even with the classes that I was good at, like math, I really struggled. I couldn't understand anything. But by the end of it, I was forced to speak. There's no other option for me. I would just cry myself to sleep because I would just learn new words every day. I'm like, I don't know what this means. I don't know what this means. I don't know what this means. And English is also very idiom driven. I don't know if it was a teacher or a friend of mine. I asked the question and he goes, "Oh, we'll just fly by the seat of our pants." And that just didn't make any sense. I'm like, I know what each word means, but when you say fly by the seat of our pants, I don't know what that means.
Right.
So you got to learn the language, learn the culture, learn how people think and how they even like to hear stories. But also on top of that, like I guess when I mentioned I was being groomed, even my experience in high school in the U.S., I was the only Saudi in the high school. So you can imagine, everyone came up to me and asked me questions. Some of them were accusational questions, and some of them were not. Some of it was curiosity. And I had to learn from my dad to respond with a story. Like instead of just responding with dry facts, no, we don't do this, yes, we do this, is just tell a story. Well, when I'm in Saudi, I usually get in the car and you just tell a story so that people can respond to it in a non-judgmental way. So I learned, like, I watched my dad explain our culture through stories to our neighbors and our American friends. And I think I just started doing that at a young age, not knowing I'll become a filmmaker and that will be my job.
Yeah, so you highlighted the very simple but meaningful fact that storytelling is also communication, and certainly cinema is is a form of communication as well as an art form. Do you think that you eventually getting into it was also because you had a lot to say, you had a lot of stories to tell, you had them in you?
Absolutely. I mean, we had to say, and also given the context, when I was growing up, no Saudi movies were being made. No one knew what Saudi culture is, including our neighboring countries, our Arabian neighboring countries. Didn't know much about what happens in closed doors in Saudi homes, Saudi parties, hospitals, workplaces. Like no one really knew. So I never blamed international people, audiences, or people you meet in the streets for not knowing who we are because we just never shared our story with the rest of the world. There's also a cultural reason why we didn't do that. Our culture is very private. It's beautifully private. In Saudi, you are expected, not much, I mean, things are changing now, but growing up, you're very much expected to be on your best behavior. You wear your best outfits when you go outside. You carry yourself in a manner that's very professional, very culturally appropriate when you're outside. You loosen up when you're with your friends and inside the privacy of your home or gatherings. And the problem is when news stations used to show up and document something in Saudi, they're only seeing what's public. They would see men in white robes, we call them thobes, or women in black robes, which is abayas, and that's what they get. So it takes a while for a foreigner or someone who's visiting Saudi to finally understand, like, this culture is not very public, it's very private. Completely the opposite of what's happened in the US. In the US, you just walk down the street and everybody is speaking their mind to the world. You would, sit in a coffee shop and you would hear two people telling the most intimate stories about what happened last night with their wives, and you're like, I don't know if you should say this out loud. At least as a Saudi, I don't think it's appropriate. So, anyways, knowing that fact that we are a very private culture, it makes sense that people were not exposed to our culture, and it's now becoming my job to allow people to access the private lives of Saudis. All my movies center around that, allowing other people to see who we truly are from the inside.
You want to tell stories for the outside world, but you also want to tell the stories for your people.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a need for local filmmakers to share local stories for the local audiences only. But I lean towards the second track, which is telling stories that will cross borders and bridge gaps and allow us to understand each other. My obsession is with creating genre films that are international, that are commercial, that have some elements of my culture in them. I truly believe that if you are going to be making a movie, it better be engaging. I don't want to say commercial only, but it better be engaging, as in you show it to anyone, they want to watch the rest of the film. And it better have a message. It better have something that you want to say. Why would you take a year to 2 years making a movie only for it to be action and doesn't have any substance behind it? But I think that's kind of my formula right now that I'm focusing on, is make sure it's exciting, make sure it's genre, it's commercially successful, because if it's commercially successful, it means that more butts will be on the seats watching your movie, which means more people will be exposed to the message or the theme or the point you're trying to make.
I want to return to some of that, what you said later on in our conversation, but I realized that we've skipped a step because we talked about you getting into animation, but I guess people listening to this may have already assumed, but then you also started working in live action projects, right?
Yeah, sorry. Definitely we skipped ahead, but kind of the transition is during college. So my undergrad was in computer graphics animation, which was the eye-opening period for me. I did my master degree. It's a hybrid two master degree. We didn't have a PhD in our university, but I did do the screenwriting track and the directing track, or the production track and the directing track. That was mostly live action. During my master degree, I launched a production company with my friend from school, and he is still my business partner. His name is Patrick Wimp. We launched a company called Digital Hydra. It was literally out of my garage. What happened immediately is we were able to capture a lot of the bigger clients because of my background in animation and his amazing screenwriting skills. So right off the bat, we were able to get a lot of bigger clients: McDonald's, Nike, Facebook, you name it. We would create commercials for them because we were young, affordable, and really pushed the cinematic language forward. So that kind of cemented the concept that I can make money through production. And then we continued working on different jobs, mostly like all other filmmakers. You start doing commercials and then you slowly transition to more narrative work. So for me, the transition was I've done a lot of commercials. I've done a lot of short films for myself and for my friends. We would shoot just a lot of short films. And then I got the opportunity to direct music videos out of the Middle East, and then a TV series. And, one thing leads to another. And then slowly we began working for bigger production companies or alongside bigger production companies. And then we started really writing and directing big movies and TV shows. So it's a lot of work and a lot of dedication and a lot of exposure to what is needed out there in the market. I initially was very hesitant to go back to the Middle East and work there. It was something, I tried to prove myself to myself that I can make myself in the US. But then I realized I should double down on what makes me unique, which is I'm a Saudi filmmaker who had the fortune of being in the US in a really good film school, exposed to a lot of great clients. So I started doubling down on that. The music video I did is now one of the most watched music videos out of the Middle East. Then the TV show that we did was for 1 year, it was the third most watched show during the month of Ramadan. So I started appreciating that I could be a big player in an emerging market in the Middle East. So that was how I transitioned from animation to live action.
When you say emerging market in the Middle East, what does that mean?
Saudi did not have a film industry up until potentially 2019, I would say. And previous to 2019, there were a lot of great filmmakers. I'm not going to claim that I was the only one, but you can go back all the way to the generation of my uncle. He went to UCLA. He studied filmmaking. He worked on big movies, so on and so forth, but no one knows about them. No one knows what they've done. There was no social media. There's not a lot of attention that was given or that we give to older people who have done this. But anyways, there was no local infrastructure. We didn't have cinemas. Cinemas were not built. We didn't have many channels. As I mentioned to you, I remember the days that even the Saudi first channel, the national channel, wasn't live all the time. They didn't play anything. I would watch the countdown. So there was limited output sources for media, exhibitors or ways of consuming media in Saudi. So Saudi is currently an emerging market because they are realizing, and I'm very proud to be a part of this generation of witnessing this right now, is the government is realizing that media is an amazing cultural tool and a financial tool that they can use to clear the misconception about who they are as a country and also generate some profits along the way. So it is emerging. There are not a lot of Saudi movies that have been made, except recently. Their cinemas are now what 3 to 5 years old. Like actual complexes are now 3 to 5 years old. There are not a lot of film schools, but it's all being built right now. We're witnessing all being built. And with that comes the excitement of being a trendsetter and also the reality of that, you got to be patient. Things are going to be slow, but they're going to be great. The advantage of Saudi versus other emerging markets is that the government is very, very supportive of filmmaking. So I consider myself very lucky to be in an emerging market that fully supports you and finances your movies. I am the recipient of many, many grants from the Ministry of Culture, from CDF, the Cultural Development Fund, from Red Sea International Film Festival. And I wouldn't be here if these initiatives and grants were not in place. So it is an emerging market. Everybody is learning what it is, but there's huge potential and huge support for filmmakers like me.
Right, yeah, an emerging market, and you're one of the most watched Saudi directors. You're working on a project now called Running Dry, and I would love for you to maybe share with us as much as you can about it and tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to talk about it, I have to just go back just a little bit and explain the context of why this movie and how we were able to do that. I think I am considered, I don't feel like I'm old, but I am older than most of the emerging filmmakers right now. And I had to work in the US because at the time when I began my professional career, there wasn't a lot of opportunities in Saudi. I did make a movie or participate in making a movie called Arabia, which is an IMAX movie that screened worldwide. It was considered one of the first movies to be shot completely in Saudi from start to finish. We screened it everywhere. We even screened it to King Charles in his home in London. That was the only and biggest opportunity that I had early on in my professional career. So I kept an eye on what was going on in Saudi, and I tried making movies before 2019, and it just did not work. It was too early. Continued making movies in Saudi. Up until like 2018, we began noticing like there's ministries being formed. The Ministry of Culture came out. Then later on, there was something called the Film Commission that was established, and I got involved initially as a consultant, helping them with some of their programs and whatnot. But I truly believe that the only way to build an industry is to make a product like a film or a TV show. So from that point on, I began focusing my attention on finding stories that would fit my agenda or what I believe is going to be a successful movie. So around 2018, I came to Saudi, looked for local ideas that we can turn into internationally successful movies that are within the budget range that I have in mind. And I collected a bunch of really, really interesting ideas. The one that stuck with me was the story of Running Dry. And he was introduced, the concept was introduced by someone who's now a dear friend of mine. His name is Walid Sanad. Briefly, the concept was about two young Saudis who end up going overseas to do something they shouldn't do, illegal business, only to be stuck overseas and learn the lesson that they shouldn't do this and come back. I did enjoy the structure of the story. It had the backbone of being an internationally successful story because we are following Saudis that leave home and go to another culture. It was in the same or in the vein of the movie previously I made that's called Rupture, which is about a couple that moves to London and experience a cultural shock. So I like that backbone of the story of Running Dry. But with every movie, I also want to bring a theme that I am 100% obsessed with. I am currently obsessed with the idea of capitalism, materialism versus culture. Just because I'm a father now, I'm really struggling with this concept of how does one continue being financially successful and have all the materialistic things they need for the family and whatnot, yet maintain their culture. So for every movie, I select a topic that is worth my time, because I know making movies, you're going to be spending a year to 2 years making a movie away from your family. I like to have a theme and a topic that I can justify why I'm taking time away from my family to do the movie. And to me, this topic is very important. And I include my family, my friends in this topic, because it's a process of discovery. So for me, the movie Running Dry checked two boxes for me, which is an exciting story that could be told internationally, and it has some Saudi elements, and it's a theme that I really, really care about. So I breathed and I rewrote the story with my screenwriter to infuse what I just mentioned, the whole concept of how do we deal with materialism versus culture as a topic. This is what we're currently filming. Again, just to summarize, it came out of my desire to go back to Saudi and help the emerging market by creating international movies. I have done, previous to Running Dry, a movie called Rupture, and then I produced a movie called How I Got There. These two movies won Best Film at the Red Sea International Film Festival, Best Saudi Film at the Red Sea International Film Festival. And then Running Dry is the next in line, and I have two other films that I want to do. So it's a slate of 5 films that I'm trying to do in Saudi for Saudi and the international market.
There's a lot happening, Hamzah, and it's been great chatting with you about your projects. We should do this again.
I'm here. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you for hosting me, and I look forward to chatting with you more.
I hope you enjoyed this latest episode of the Showcast, and please consider following the TFV network on your favorite podcast platform for more exclusive audio-based content, including conversations with top industry professionals and creatives, as well as film reviews from across the international film festival scene. And you can also find us at filmverdictnetwork.com. Thanks again for listening. Until the next time, this is Matt Micucci signing off. See you soon.